Welcome to the Christopher Peter Review. My name is Christopher Peter and I am the political economist, investor, and podcaster behind the original content you will experience on the Christopher Peter Review podcast series. As a political economist, I aim to find ideas that can create the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. I review salient current events and discuss the impact these events have on our public policy, our economic outcomes, and our overall society and what is the optimal approach. Let us begin this special episode. Generally speaking, a narrative is a story used to explain a general occurrence of something or provide a preferred perspective. When you hear the word narrative, there always is some bit of hesitation in believing what comes next. Narratives are not always false, but sometimes they oversimplify things or ignore the obvious counters. For instance, there is a narrative around elections not involving the federal government. These elections are viewed as not important. But every election day is important to someone. To some group of people. Since the last time we spoke, there was one of the election days better known as an off-cycle election. Off-cycle makes it seem like it is not important, but every election day is important to some group of people. In Philadelphia, this election day was important to its residents because it ushered in a new era that will probably be no different than the recent ones led by their last few mayors. The greatest impact on our outcomes are not really the people in Washington as much as those around us locally. And cities like Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, and others have issues that are direct results of the political environments that encompass their cities. There are narratives that keep these cities under one-party rule. Keeping these city residents impacted by crime, poverty, high costs of living, and other social ills is the result of people believing the same narratives. Think about it for a moment. If you live in cities experiencing the doom loop, you are actually paying more in taxes, housing, and life expenses while having lower qualities of life. I have known many city dwellers who believe that city life is better than alternatives. Until they leave the city for job changes, life moments, and realize that the narratives are not true. If you are in any of these cities and are not happy with the cost of living, quality of life, and the direction you feel your communities are heading, then why are doing the same things and hoping for different outcomes? Why are you accepting the same assumptions and narratives and feel so confident that the outcomes will be any different than before? You have to question who is benefiting from these dogmas if you are not. And if you are not satisfied, then why are you not changing the decisions you make? Change the jobs you seek. Change the financial choices you make. Change who you vote for. This off-cycle election may not have been viewed as very important because there were no national races, but it was to some. Members of Congress did not work on campaigns that directly impacted their prospects. Rather may have stumped for candidates that helped increase their influence and political network. So for the media, off-cycle elections are not considered gravely important. Other than for them to make far-reaching conclusions taking regional occurrences and nationalizing it. But this off-cycle election is now behind us. There now is nothing between American voters and the next presidential cycle. The next election day will be consequential. As many in the media like to say, it will become the next most important election since the past national election cycle. Many like to point out the hyperbole of this hysteria-driven practice of raising the stakes of every contest. But elections do have consequences. The people voted into power impacted society as a whole, not just those who voted from them. Even the people who voted for them might not get the outcomes they expected. Who knows what we will be facing when it is time to cast our ballots? Will another regional war break out? Will the current wars collide into a global conflict? Will the highly anticipated recession finally occur, ending the months of prognosticating? No one really knows what to expect between now and then. Recapping 2023 will be very interesting in comparison to last year. Not sure many could have expected so many things to occur and so many new challenges thrusted upon the people who continue to show the least capability to address these problems. And better yet, in less than 365 days, American voters will get to cast a ballot deciding which of the two polarizing candidates to put in the White House in a rematch that no one really wants to see and no one is excited about. Other than the people supporting them. But I am sure there are many Trump supporters who want to see Biden decide to not rerun. And there are probably an equal number of Biden supporters who want Democrats to continue doing whatever can be done to manipulate the ballot choice. Of course there are those who want it out of vengeance for 2020. There are two equally misleading narratives that people are being asked to believe. One is that a second Trump term would be just as effective from a policy perspective as the first. Another is that a second Biden term would be more effective than the disastrous first one, despite having aged more and less capacity. The reality staring us down is that neither second term is really positioned well for success. Many of the people who contributed to the overall success of the Trump era will not be returning, nor will they be invited to be honest. It will be much different, and who really knows if lightning can strike twice. For Biden, he would lose more staff during a second term as well. And his first term continues to spiral downwards overall, with few positive moments. And his health is not getting any better, which people can clearly observe. Americans are facing a rematch they really do not want because alternative choices have not found a message or a narrative that the public can connect with. Other than being occupied with projects and dealing with suppliers, I did not cover the recent Republican debate because the contests are essentially over until the voting actually starts. The candidates are not doing enough to move the needle, and Trump continues to dominate the polls, despite running his own basement campaign. The alternatives will not be effective in drawing Trump into a direct engagement because Republicans obviously do not want it enough. As long as the gap remains large, he will be able to stay away and let the field fight amongst themselves. This past weekend, America recognized the service of the brave men and women who serve and have served in our nation's military. Just for clarity, America celebrates military service on Veterans Day and remembers those lost in service on Memorial Day. America should always revere the sacrifices made by these brave individuals who make it possible to live the lives of our choosing and protect our freedoms. I have never served but have great respect for those that do. These individuals put their lives on the line for people they will never meet, people will never understand the circumstances of their services, and people who take for granted the personal cost of service to our veterans and the risks. While many think about the combat role soldiers play, but we must remember that there are many humanitarian efforts our soldiers make happen. Peacekeeping roles they make possible. Our freedoms are never free and the threats are always around us. While people may think #campaigns, tweets, or other social media changes these crises, it is the bravery of our soldiers to confront the dangers and threats head on and make change happen. Thank you to all who have served, continue to serve, and will serve in the future. Back to Philadelphia for a moment. Philly is one of my favorite cities. I was born there. My favorite sports teams play there. I want to take a few minutes and talk more about the Philadelphia election. For the most part, the city of Philadelphia is a one-party ruled city because Republicans are not making a great effort to really offer voters an alternative to Democratic machine. While voters tend to keep making the same choice, they have not really been effectively offered a real alternative. The city key to our nation's founding should not continue being a single-party rule city, which is truly harming its residents. Philadelphia continues to lag behind other large American cities in many areas, including poverty ratings. Philly is a great city, but it is plagued by poverty and crime. Now, the new mayor, its first female mayor, wants to lift the city by addressing its hope deficit. Now, the political class loves to use the same practice management consultants use in creating buzzwords. In Philly, the Philly residents keep it real. The city is not facing a hope deficit, they are facing the consequences of progressive public policy. Unlike other big cities, businesses prefer to domicile outside of Philly than inside the city borders because of the cost and environment that is anti-business. Besides healthcare, higher education, and some financial institutions, most jobs are in the suburbs of southern New Jersey or neighboring Pennsylvania counties. The city has become a safe haven for criminals rather than its residents. The crime numbers have people referring back to the city one-time moniker Killadelphia. Back when you had to keep your head on a swivel when pumping gas, attending games, or walking in Center City. The city is a sanctuary city and has a district attorney who embraces those same progressive values, failing other big cities. While there is always some level of hope when a new administration takes over, the underlying trends cannot be ignored. Elected officials need to be more than carefully crafted phrases to conveniently select the issues they are willing to address. Winning in a single-party political environment is not an achievement. Like being a relative that is promoted in a family business. Actions and results speak louder than words. Especially in a city where they have voted for a lot of bad leaders over and over again. The last major labor strike is now over. As the Hollywood writers' strike is officially over. This comes not that long after the American Big Three just ended their months-long strategic strike that ended with 3 deals that appear to be similar in nature. Which makes sense. Once one organization comes to terms, it lays the foundation for other deals as well. While auto workers wanted a 40% increase in wages, it seems like they will have to be fine with a 25% increase instead, which is still a really good amount. In both strikes, the common theme that many are not talking about much is the threat of technology to them. For writers, the growing presence of artificial intelligence may reduce the number of writers needed or change their roles. For auto workers, the government-facilitated transition to electric vehicles will harm their demand as a significantly lower number of workers are needed in EV production compared to a gasoline vehicle. Interesting to see that automakers have made some staff changes following the deals. Not completely surprising when the cost of labor is increasing, as the overall economy is probably going to decline or stagnate in the upcoming year. Also, I did read an academic paper years ago that raised the possibility that with each new industry changing labor deal, the number of unionized workers would tend to decline. For writers, I think the work will definitely change. You cannot expect any industry to ignore the potential progress that comes with technological advancement. While I agree that what makes certain writing entertaining may not be easily recreated, I think writers may shift towards editing or reworking the original drafts created by artificial intelligence. Maybe they need to use artificial intelligence to reduce their turnaround time and effort. Now, the biggest story in sports right now is probably the sign stealing scandal that is engulfing the University of Michigan's undefeated football team. We have talked about this a few episodes ago, but new developments have taken place. Currently, the Big Ten Conference decided to step in and suspend head coach Jim Harbaugh from coaching the team on game day. Was it the right or wrong decision? The suspension is not a real suspension in my opinion. Harbaugh is able to coach and prepare the team throughout the week in the same manner of his beginning of the year 3-game suspension. He is just barred from being there on game day. Starting this past Saturday, he will be able to have a seat while watching the game. From articles I read, the Big Ten commissioner seems to point out that this was a punishment for the university, not Jim Harbaugh, but it would be Harbaugh suffering the consequences. However minor they truly are. Similarly in hockey, where a player is designated to serve a penalty for the bad behavior of their goalie. Now that we know what the penalty is, at least from the Big Ten, I think it might make more sense to have waited for the NCAA to rule on the case. While the university made the claim that a coach can have an impact on the game amounting to 20 to 30%, I would argue that the negative impact of this event may be muted by the fact that he is still able to prepare the team. Just having the calls made by his surrogates, who still report to him. I am not sure many conferences would preempt the NCAA. But it is a conference thing. The narrative driven by the fans and supporters of the Michigan Wolverines football team is making Coach Jim Harbaugh and the university out as martyrs. Recently, the university released documents to try to portray other universities in a similar light. Downplaying the difference being that what they were found to have done was not explicitly barred like the alleged actions done by Michigan. But it is a public relations trick to try to play down the effect of the wrongdoing and try to minimize the wrongness. They are taking the position of being victims when they enjoyed the most control of the situation. I saw one of the pregame shows offer a narrative on the scandal as being a result of other universities being upset that Michigan broke a rule. Downplaying the scheme as simply not following the letter of the rulebook. Now, the counter-narrative is that breaking rules can be bad and impactful because behaviors that challenge competitive integrity harm the legitimacy of championships and games won. An interesting perspective was made during the week highlighting the fact that it was not that long ago when there was serious concern that Michigan may move on from Coach Harbaugh. Until the last 2 years where they have defeated Ohio State and won the Big Ten. So maybe the turnaround is not really a coincidence or an orchestrated one. Who knows at this point with the information available. But an interesting narrative. There is a precedent in college sports where the head coach is responsible for all actions that occur on their team regardless of whether they personally knew or were involved. There is reason to believe that Connor Stalions may have done this simply to improve his contributions and career path. Or because of his love for the program. Maybe that love blinded him a bit by going too far in doing something that actually harmed the program he proclaims to love. But one would have to question where the funding was coming from, given the reported salary for Stalions' position. No one would reasonably be able to give up that significant portion of their salary. Unless, they hope that investment pays off when they get an opportunity to lead a top-flight program. The most difficult part about the scandal is the fact that it impacts the current season and could potentially lead to the vacating of a national championship and wins. Usually, these scandals come out after the season they occurred or well beyond the time of the people involved. The real punishments may come out well into the off-season. For future deterrence, there are reasonable solutions being put forth to make this illegal practice that Michigan allegedly used null and void going forward. Hopefully, the NCAA implements and helps fund them. Now, there are no moral victories in sports. A team either wins or loses by the outcomes of their own effort, actions, and choices. It is not really helpful to blame luck or the officials for outcomes. I heard a person say that luck in sports is a result of preparation and opportunity created by that preparation. And officiating is not perfect, but both teams are largely impacted. But sports fans are generally biased in favor of their favorite team. You play to win games, not collect information. Close games do show that your team may match up better or worse than expected against certain opponents. For instance, there are many Cowboys fans who are talking about their loss to the Eagles like it is a moral victory. That a few plays here or there and they would have won. Most games come down to a few plays here or there. But the Eagles did enjoy the lead for the vast majority of the game, and the lead was more than one score for a significant portion of the second half. There are some voices out there that seem to think that the Cowboys will win out while the Eagles will struggle with their upcoming gauntlet of games. As I stated last week, the Cowboys played a great game in their loss. The same factors that cost them the game in Philly and against the Niners are still there. Not sure how one can think any team in the NFL right now can win every game of their remaining schedule. And the Eagles are not the only team with difficult games ahead. For instance, besides the second game against Philly and Dallas, the Cowboys have to play the Dolphins in Miami. Despite the narrative that currently surrounds Miami, we have to keep in mind that those losses are all on the road. Not in the convenient confines of their home stadium, where the opposing team sits under the glare of the sun, while the Dolphins enjoy shade. Also, the Bills host the Cowboys, while the Eagles get them at home. But those games might be easier after the Bills gave away a very winnable game against the Broncos, where turnovers and mental mistakes cost the Bills. Even after 4 turnovers, the Bills would have won if they could execute an exchange of the defense and special teams without an extra player. It all came down to a 12th man and a redo following a missed field goal. The Bills now face an equally challenging finish to the year. There is no denying that my Eagles have a challenging schedule ahead of us. We may lose the game in Dallas. But I do not think it is rational to think any team will run the table. What may happen is that the division comes down to a difference of a single game. Now, what happened this week? I kept believing that there is no way the New England Patriots could move on from a historic coach in Bill Belichick, who is on the brink of setting the all-time wins mark. But his decision-making lately is questionable. The Patriots' offense is not clicking, but I am not sure replacing Mac Jones at the end of the game was the right move. While Jones has his issues, putting the backup to try to score on the last drive is an uphill climb for any backup. If you were going to make a change, why not making it sooner? The voices who said that you cannot pick up a quarterback and getting them ready in season are being proven wrong by the Minnesota Vikings. In 2 weeks, the Vikings were able to secure victories with a quarterback that started the year playing for the Cardinals. In his first start, he did not even know the names of his teammates yet. That is an amazing feat not only by Josh Dobbs, but by the coaching staff as well. For New York Jets fans, this cannot sit well for all the voices that spoke against adding a quarterback. The Niners are back on track after dropping 3 straight games following their decisive domination of their historic rival in the Dallas Cowboys. But the Niners showed that their even more talented roster could travel to Jacksonville and end a 5-game win streak to the upcoming Jaguars team. Seems like most people are not sold on the Ravens despite their recent string of dominant wins. They are good every year, but always seem to fall apart in the playoffs through unexpected bad performances or injuries. But the Ravens are quietly winning without much attention from the national sports media. The AFC continues to show that it may be the more competitive conference with viable contenders in the Chiefs, Ravens, Jaguars, Dolphins, and Bills. Not including the potential of the Browns, Steelers, Colts, and Texans making a surprise run. The NFC is centered around the Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, and maybe the Lions. No other team is really a concern. The Seahawks are somewhat underperforming. The Vikings have rebounded to some degree but are not really a threat at this point. The Saints are not getting healthier and its division is not getting any better. At this point, I think the best contenders for the Super Bowl are still the Eagles and Niners. The recent additions to the Niners rosters has restored their standing, it appears. If they get back on track, they may be the overall favorite. For 5 straight weeks, they were leading the pack and it was not even close. But the Eagles continue to find wins and control their games. Hopefully, we continue to win and make a nice long run in the postseason. Thank you for experiencing this special content on the Christopher Peter Review. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media, especially on YouTube and YouTube Music, where you can now experience the full portfolio of the Christopher Peter Review. Please continue to visit www.crcreview.com for more. Until next time.